I'm Jim Middleton, and welcome to Flying by the Seat of My Paints. This is the Entrepreneur Podcast, designed for artists who, like many of us, want to translate our passion into a paycheck. The tips and tricks myself and upcoming guests have learned along the way, we want to share to help you get one step closer to that ultimate art goal of making art your full-time job. We're going to cover topics like how to promote, how to price, how to show your art, how to become a better artist yourself. For this, our 7th episode, we're going to be exploring what I think is a key part of developing your art style, determining your art parents. Art parents are really just another way of describing your artistic influences, but they're more directly connected with you as parts of their work may find their way into your own. Before we dive into art parents, as usual, I'm going to start with what's flying this week, which details my own personal art journey. If you aren't interested in this section, you want to just jump right into the main episode, go to the description in the podcast. I'll list the time so you can jump and skip right to that section. If you're sticking around, here we go. I'm working out the rhythm of my home business right now. So that's kind of what I'm dealing with. So I'm in my 2nd year of working to make art my full-time job. Actually, I guess I'm in my 3rd. I've been painting for over 2. Again, been doing art most of my life. Made the decision when I found painting that I really wanted to turn this into something full-time. And most recently in July, due to COVID, I was laid off from my job. So, because we sold into the States, and I totally kind of get it. But I wanted to take that time, say, look, other jobs may come along. This is really what I want to do. This is what I've been working towards full time. So I need to put everything into it. The main thing was I was absolutely pursuing it before, but I had a different daily schedule. I'd work from 8 till 5. My art was in the evenings and weekends. After doing that for 2 years, I found that I'm kind of struggling getting used to doing my art in an 8 to 5 day. You'd think it would be easier, but it's been throwing me off. I have some days where, I'll go 3-4 days in a row really well, and then other days I'm just totally pulled off. And I get, as I've talked to you before, I get pulled in a lot of different directions. And again, I'm not an expert. I guess that's what I want to say. This podcast is all about sharing with you what I've learned. And I hope that you guys can find something of value in it. But I'm also the first to say that I'm still learning, guys, like all of us. And I think if you get to a stage where you don't think you're learning, I think you might be a little disillusioned. I think there's always something more to learn. I think there's always a way to improve. And that's kind of where I am right now. It's kind of nailing down, getting this new timeline ironed out. And getting in a regular routine, it affects my mood, it affects how I work, it affects everything. So, hey, and if you guys have some suggestions, send them in. And again, at the end of the podcast, we'll talk about ways you can contact us, ways you can give us questions. But, I'm absolutely love to hear it. Anything that you have that, can help me on my way, as much as I want to help you guys, please feel free to share. So first up, what's working? Bullet journaling is great. It is moving me forward, and it also helps level me out when I'm bummed because I think that I'm off course, right? So I can get pissed at myself because I feel like I haven't gotten enough done. But then I look back over the week and I feel a little satisfaction going, okay, you did get a lot of stuff done. I have a new creators market. I'm helping actually start a brand new farmers market in my hometown with a group of other former vendors from the old market. We have completed getting ourselves incorporated as a nonprofit. We're actively seeking new buildings and placements of land. So there's a lot going on with that, which is an aside to my regular art stuff, but it's been taking a lot of my time, and it's moving forward. I can't look at it and say that it's not. It absolutely is. We have we own our website name. We've gotten a lot of things started there. I've started a personal project for myself called A Creative for Me, is what I've called it, 100 Days Creative for Me, where I make a point of doing something, it may be a commission I'm working on. It might be something personal for me, but it's something that I'm excited to share with the people who follow me, and I make sure that I get that stuff out to them. So that's been a good thing over the last week. I've organized my upcoming commissions and added a few more this week. I've mapped out ideas for all 30 days of Inktober coming up next month in October. I planned some client meetings, prepped both this podcast and the next one. Actually, I apologize that we're running a day late, but part of it's because of a limited timeline of a special guest that I have for the next podcast. This one may be a day late. The next one might be a little bit early. We'll try to keep them at a regular cadence, but the fact that I did two at once slowed me down a little bit. But I'm excited to share what that is, so I don't want to give that away too soon. I've still got a mountain of work left to do, but I'm chipping away at rocks every day, and it's important to recognize your gains. It's really easy to get overwhelmed and say, oh, I'm not doing this, this isn't working out. Don't get discouraged. Keep moving forward, pay attention to what you're doing, and give yourself credit where credit is due. Right? I'm one of the biggest people to, beat myself up more than I should, but making a point to make note of your wins, it's important. So what's screwing me up? Distraction wise, my phone, TV. I'm sure that's what a lot of people run into. I find I don't have as much issue with my family, things like that, because I do separate myself. Like I'm down here in the basement, so I'm kind of away from everybody else. If I'm upstairs trying to write a podcast script or working on my bullet journal, it's so easy to go, or even when I get up first thing in the morning, I'll just watch a 20-minute video on YouTube, whatever. And it snowballs. I mean, those YouTube, your phone, streaming series with multiple shows, it's all designed to kind of suck you in, right, from the ground up. And those are the things that I really need to completely remove myself from to focus on what I'm working on. It was kind of easier before because I had such a limited time in the evening to get stuff done that it was literally come home, grab a bite to eat, go downstairs. And I'd work on what I needed to work on and then go up for maybe a half hour or so before bed. And then I'd watch a show or something. And I wouldn't get sucked into a whole new world of other stuff. But I find it far too easy to get distracted now, far too easy to fall down that YouTube rabbit hole. I was going to watch a 20-minute video and suddenly I realized 4 hours are gone. Or I'm just going to check out part of an episode of Lovecraft Country on HBO because it looks cool, and suddenly I've watched all the entire first 5 episodes, and that's only because there's only 5 out so far. So my point is, again, I'm the farthest thing from perfect or the person with all the answers. I can easily fall into a spiral just like anybody else. Really easy for procrastination to say to me when I get overwhelmed, hey, let's not think about it for a while. Let's give your brain a break. And then I do that, and immediately after I've given my brain a break, I feel worse. It's this addict spiral behavior thing that I recognize in myself. And I think, with any problem, you got to recognize it first. I've looked at smokers most of my life and said, why don't they just quit? Meanwhile, I'm struggling with social media and entertainment. I think it's fair to call it an addiction. I feel like it's the same kind of way with food. Yeah, that's a tough thing with if you compare like drugs or alcohol, you can survive without. Right? I have friends who were former alcoholics and former drug addicts, and it's really very much a cold turkey. That's it, I'm done. The problem with things like entertainment is you do need sometimes that are a break for your brain. Maybe it's finding different forms of entertainment, getting together with family, playing Cards Against Humanity, having a laugh. Maybe it's getting some time for that walk and meditation in the morning to kind of remove my brain from everything. But it's that hedonistic tendency to fall into something, and then you ignore your healthy limits. So those are the things for me that I need to kind of keep going back to. It reminds me of a smoker, that says never, don't quit quitting, right? Keep trying to get better, keep working on it. I know there are people who would listen to me saying this and say that I'm beating myself up, and I don't think I'm beating myself up. I think that I'm recognizing things that stress me out and trying to get better. And I think self-improvement's an important thing. And I think that I've got lots to do, and I'm pleased with what I've done, and I just want to do more because I feel like I deserve it. Today, I set a timer that said, you're putting 8 hours in today. No matter what, you're putting 8 hours in on art and art-related stuff. And if I grab my phone, because I'm curious if I still have it running here, if I go into my timer and take a look to see, yeah, I still have about 90 minutes left. And that's fine, right? That's me putting in the time that I want to do today. So, as I said, I said it before, I did a doodle on it last night. You really need to eat the frog. Get the hard things done early. That actually comes from an old Mark Twain saying uh, that he actually said, eat a frog first thing, eat a frog first thing in the morning. It'll be the worst thing you do all day. So that's kind of created this mantra that some people talk about is whatever the thing is that you're dreading the most, you're like, God, I don't want to do that. Do it first. If you hate doing dishes, it's your least favorite thing, and you put it off all day, and you finally do it, and God, I don't want to. It sits in your brain all day that you don't want to do this thing you hate. Jump on it first thing in the morning. I think he also said if you've got to eat two frogs, it's always better to eat the bigger one first. Same kind of idea. Look at whatever and I did a drawing. I posted up on Instagram last night because it's where my brain was at. Getting the hard things done early. Start the day with the tough stuff. Delay your gratification to the end of the day. Have that as your reward. Have that if that's your brain, whatever, relax. I'm not really doing anything related to, art or work. At the end of the day, save it till then. Don't start out with it at the first. It just throws everything off. So there are days where, have kind of felt a crap. There are days that have gone exactly the way I wanted them. But I think focusing on how I felt at the end of the day when they went to crap versus how I felt at the end of the day when I kind of jumped on things and got things out of the way. I think that it's Buddhism that talks about how the source of all suffering is desire. And one of our biggest natural desires that exists within us is to get things done that we want to get done. So having those hanging around in the back of your head can be difficult, can be challenging. So by getting them out of the way, I think that's the secret to peace and joy mentally. For me, and it's different for everybody, is finishing stuff. I want to get done. Things are hanging over my head. They cause me stress. I can't mentally move forward. So I need to get those things done another way. Otherwise, it drives me crazy. Now, my favorite moment of the last week, and I do think it's important to recognize, things when they're exciting and they happen, is my GBAT Fat F project. Now, GBAT Fat F is my little acronym that I created. Goodbye and thanks for all the fish. GBAT FBAT. I made up the acronym. It's from the line from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the Douglas Adams book, When the Dolphins All Leave the World and the Humans Behind. Because I was really thinking about kind of what we're doing to the planet as a whole. And I didn't want to necessarily, it can be heavy, man, if you really kind of go down that road. But I wanted to kind of talk about awareness, but also have fun and try to keep it a little bit playful and basically have a positive potential thought in my mind of sea creatures kind of giving up on us and saying, screw you guys, see ya, I'm out. And so I did this series of sea creatures kind of abandoning humans, sailing away on balloons. And they're all done on brown paper grocery bags, a variety of mixed media. One of the first things I noticed working on them was that I was smiling, that I was having fun doing them, and I was excited about what I was going to do next and what other animals I'd like to do. And they seemed to be engaging other people when I was sharing them online. I need more of that in my life, making sure that that I'm creative regularly, and that's a part of my day is a big motivator for me moving forward. Making sure every day there's something that you're working on that's just for you. I think it makes all the difference. Okay, so time-wise, because I'm going to make a quick check, so we're going to do that jump point for everybody. Get back to our Anchor app. I'm doing this live and everything. So 14:50. So we can jump ahead. I'm just going to make a quick note of that so we can make a note in the description after the fact. That's where the time jump is. So, thanks for listening. Now, for those of you who've skipped ahead, let's dive into our topic of the day, finding your art parents. So, the term art parents, I heard it for the first time from Stan Prokopenko and Marshall Vandruff on the fantastic art podcast, The Draftsman. Absolutely check them out. You get the chance. They're both. Stan runs the site proco.com. Marshall is an art teacher. I know it's for one of the noted art institutions in California, and I'm blanking on the name, so I don't. But I'm sure if you look it up, you can absolutely find it. Definitely check them out. Listen to their discussion on the topic. I'm going to explore it a little bit differently, but they very much kind of went to how they would develop their style out of it. And I'm kind of looking at it a little bit differently. And again, it can relate to your style. But I think I'm going to do it a little differently. I want to have some fun with this. And I want you to do, if you'd like, make some notes as you're going along. That's how I learn stuff. I have a book and I make notes all the time. This is something you guys can do too if you want. So, just to see if you already have a good grasp on who your art parents are or could be, maybe you haven't thought about it at all. I do think that exploring it will open up some opportunities for growth. So grab a pen and paper for yourself. Feel free to make notes. Pause me if you need to. Google some things while we talk if you want. This is always an audio first podcast. I will, however, be doing a little bonus section at the end of this podcast where I apply all these principles that I'm going to be discussing in today's podcast with examples, pictures of some of the works of my personal art parents, and how maybe you can see it, maybe you can't, but how it's affected my work, what my work looked like prior to thinking about who my art parents were versus some of the things that came after I kind of discovered who my art parents were. So if you're interested, you can watch that on Jim Middleton Art on youtube.com. Again, that link will be in the description afterwards, but I'll do that separate at the end of the podcast because it is picture based. It doesn't make much sense on the podcast, but we're going to cover all the topics in detail so you can use that for you. So, have you ever considered your influences? Do you ever say to yourself, I want to paint like Michelangelo or sorry, paint like Da Vinci. Michelangelo painted too. Or sculpt like Michelangelo, or depending on who the guru is in your particular creative field, do you think about, wanting to create works like theirs? Maybe you want to draw superhero comics like Jim Lee or create fantasy work like Frank Frazetta. Most artists, I would think, could call out some people's work they love. If you can, take a minute, write them down. And again, pause anytime you need to, if you need to. So the next question, if you have influences, how well do you know the body of their work? If you love Picasso, maybe you only know a half dozen, a couple dozen of his pieces, 20, 30. Do you know that Picasso created almost 50,000 pieces of work while he was alive? Between drawings, ceramics, paintings, sculptures. The man has one of the largest bodies of work ever created. Some people have smaller bodies of work. But if you thought about Van Gogh, or Van Gogh, if you want to say it accurately, you would probably consider maybe a dozen or so paintings. He created well over 800. Getting to know your art parents' body of work and how they progressed will give you a better idea as to how maybe their work relates to the kind of work you want to create. So and that's the other question, do you aspire to make art in any way like their style? Or do you just think their work's cool and you don't necessarily want to make the same kind of work? These are the things that kind of changed for me outlook-wise when I actually started diving into it. I love Renaissance art. Da Vinci would have been somebody that I would have instantly listed as an influence for me since I was a kid. I love science fiction and fantasy, comic books like Swamp Thing and Conan the Barbarian, fantasy work like from Frank Frazetta. I always love the animal work from Robert Bateman. Those would be people who instantly came to my mind. So for me, when I started to seriously consider who my art parents would be, I started to look at their bodies of work as a whole of those people. I, started digging through their, collections of work and seeing, a broader understanding of what they've done. Then I thought about, as I went through their work and looked at their pieces, I started saving pieces that spoke to me specifically into a folder for me to look at later. Then I thought about what kind of art I wanted to make. And I started with a very simple premise: realism. For you, it might be abstract. For you, it could be a variety of things depending on the type of art you're creating and the things that speak to you. It could be flowers, it could be landscapes, it could be children, it could be a number of things that speak to you. But you want to think about what excites you to create. You know, is it impressionistic work? Start with a very simple overall search term as kind of a, for me it was realism. That's a favorite art style for me. And I think the first thing I did was search the 100 most famous realistic paintings. I think I also searched loose realism and Renaissance realism, modern realism. I think I looked up surrealism because, I love that style as well. And as I did each of these search, I started grabbing paintings, not necessarily because I knew the artist, but the paintings, the images themselves. And in this case, whatever it is for artwork that you're specifically interested in. And I started collecting these bodies of work into a folder that I could look at, And looking through these amazing pieces of art, I started looking at the pieces and saying, okay, if I've got a few hundred pieces here, can I narrow it down to 20 that I absolutely love? Did some artists come up more frequently? Did I see individual artists that once I found one awesome painting, then I started digging into their collection, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of stuff in their style that I really dig. I found subjects and pieces I saved more than anything else. Not surprisingly, it mirrored subjects I like to paint myself, scenes of people or animals in life. They were almost always action scenes. They're not posed or seemingly posed. All of these paintings had heavy interplay of light and shadow. That was a key factor that came for me. I also leaned more heavily towards images of women, rural life, water came up often. So I'm starting to see patterns, and that's what you're going to do when you start digging into styles of art you like and things that speak to you, is you start to find patterns of things, that interest you. And that kind of opens you up to, well, who are those artists? I can start narrowing down the fields. And what I started doing was I found there were people who were clearly influenced by people before them. And some people who may have been influenced by people before them, but then created something uniquely their own that stood out. I mean, we're all building, we're building on foundations laid by giants, amazing artists that all came before us. And I'm not diminishing any of them. But I would find people that a good example is Frank Frazetta. I love Frank Frazetta's work. I still do for this to this day, and I will always love his work. But I no longer look at Frank Frazetta as an art parent because I found Spanish painter Luis Ricardo Falero. I don't know that it's funny because I can't find any reference that Frank Frazetta was influenced by Luis Ricardo Falero. Uh, Falero has a very famous painting of the called the Witch's Sabbath, with a whole horde of women and men, mostly nude, all flying out into the night. It's As soon as I saw it, I would have thought that it was something Frazetta had done, but it was something that several decades, close to 100 years before, Luis Ricardo Falero had done. And once I dug into Falero's work, a lot of women, fairies, fantasy scenes, I could really see how, style-wise, I felt Frazetta had kind of built off Falero. And while Frazetta absolutely is his own piece, Falero spoke to me more, and I found the style similar enough. And Falero being a founder, that he's one of my art parents. I still think Leonardo da Vinci is a genius. I always will. I mean, who could deny it? But I lost him to Rembrandt, whose paintings of real life, I found Rembrandt more a gritty depiction of real life as opposed to an idealized, perfect, wealthy version of life, for lack of a better term. Um, and there's so much base with Leonardo. There's no question, but Rembrandt and his visions of light spoke to me more than anything else. Robert Bateman is an example of somebody who I loved before I dug into my art parents and still held strong and still holds a real chord for me, and I feel stands out on his own. I also found many more artists that I had never heard of, sadly, embarrassed to say, and would not have considered before. I found Mary Pratt. Mary Pratt is a Canadian artist I discovered who coincidentally spent some of her university years here in the town I'm living in now, though she spent most of her life in Newfoundland. Incredible realistic painter. Audrey Flack, who, like Mary Pratt, helped found modern hyperrealism. I think it typically goes to Audrey, but I look at times and ages. I don't know why Mary Pratt wouldn't be lumped in with Audrey Flack. John Singer Sargent, whose mastery of color and value allows a loose style of realism that is incredibly realistic at a distance, but falls apart into simple strokes when you get close. In the end, I went from two or three that I would have guessed to be my art parents to 14 brilliant men and women artists, and funnily enough, equal amounts, 7 men, 7 women, who all stood unique among their styles, and their only visible outward connection is their personal meaning to me, how they speak to my personal style of art, and how I'd like to grow. I loved captured moments of life from Norman Rockwell. the, Norman Rockwell and body pinups from Olivia de Barandinas, who both, by the way, uh, used image transfer quite a bit. You know, Norman Rockwell actually took photos of neighbors and family members, composed them into visions in his head that he had of real life shots, right, of exactly what they would have looked like, compared to, you know, Rural Life by Ken Danby or Rosa Bonheur. Ken Danby's probably, I had only known the name from the very famous goalie photo. And it's a great painting. But once I started digging into his work and just the interplay of light and shadow, Rosa Bonheur's capturing of farm life, the elevated style that Chris Guest, who's an existing active current modern painter from the UK, that builds on John Singer Sargent's painting style, but adapts it to his preferred subjects to create something all his own. The interplay of light from Mary Pratt, all of them finding them as, you know, all of them have, as finding them as my art parents, added something to my own art. Like real parents, I learn more from them all the time, studying their work, by digging into their art history, finding out about their personal methods of creation, adapting ideas they used that I like into my own, discarding the ones that don't quite fit my personal unique art recipe. Just like we can learn so much from our real parents, you can learn so much by taking the time to discover our art parents. You need to do the same. Write down the important things of art you love. Go look at a bunch of artwork online. Google's an amazing thing. Find some artists you've never heard of before, but you love one of their pieces. Start there. Then look at the body of their work. Get ideas. Be inspired. The fun part of this exercise is you get to adopt your art parents and figure out how they fit into the story of you as an artist. Like me, you'll probably be surprised. I guarantee you'll find something cool that you may not have even considered. I'm going to spend a little, as I mentioned before, we're going to do some time after this podcast on my YouTube only section where I'll actually do some comparisons and show work, the artists that I found that I absolutely love, and then, why they speak to me. I'll show you some of the paintings I created before and after. It's really a visual exercise, like I mentioned earlier in the pod, so it doesn't really fit necessarily in the audio section. But if you want to jump over and check it out again, the link to my Jim Middleton Art YouTube channel will be in the description, so you can check that out. If you've already listened on the pod, the video will be a jump, just like I did with the podcast, where you could jump where I'm talking about what's going on in my life. On the video, there will be a jump point where, if hey, you've already listened to the podcast on Spotify or wherever you'd like to listen to your podcast, you can just jump to Jim's personal art parent section and just watch the end if you'd like. Guys, it's been a crazy week, but a good week. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen. If you'd like to have questions answered, or you'd like to submit your artwork for feedback from myself or our guests, you can click the message link in our Anchor Podcast main page. Send us an email at flyingbytheseatofmypaints@gmail.com. If you think you have some good advice for the pod, take a moment, subscribe, rate us on your platform. That helps us get shared around. Maybe more people can find us. And hey, maybe recommend us to a fellow artist friend who's thinking about making the leap from passion to paycheck with their art. Until next time, this is Jim Middleton. Just keep creating. Okay, so I have stopped the audio portion of the podcast, and we're just with video now. So thanks for everybody who came to watch me on YouTube. And if you're just jumping to this section to listen to the audio, that's cool too. Feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get the video portions of this when they come up. If you like us on the bell, you'll get notified, like these videos. It all helps get a little momentum and let people see what we're doing here on the YouTube side. So what I'm going to do is, and I've already set this up ahead of time, I'm going to shrink my window because you don't need to see me. I've had this waiting in the background the whole time. Here is a visual side of what's going on. What I've done, I found, I think the easiest way to kind of share this is just blow the screen up large size, and then I can just go into the menu so you can see some of the work. So that's actually one of my paintings. We're going to jump out of this for the moment. And what we're going to look at is some of my art parents that I have found through exposure from other artists who've shared other people's work that's out there. One of the first ones here, and they're just alphabetical, they're not in any particular order. Aaliyah Chapin is a Canadian artist, brilliant Canadian artist. Her grasp of color and life and level of detail. She was introduced to me by another local artist, Dawn, and oh my gosh, I'm blanking out on Dawn's name. That's horrible. She's fantastic as well. Now I'm just gonna take a second and look it right up because Dawn is wonderful, and I'm not gonna miss Dawn. That's horrible. I don't want to miss that at all. Dawn, because I think Dawn Steves, I believe. I absolutely want to mention Dawn because she is somebody who I would love to have on someday. Make sure. No, that's Dawn. Yes, Dawn Steves. She's a wonderful, incredible realism artist, mostly an oil painter, and she introduced me to Aaliyah Chapin. And as I started digging through Aaliyah's work, and she has a theme that she likes to work with. She does mostly realism, physical forms of people. Going back through her history of work, she had a very impressive display at a gallery in Toronto that were all just individual nude figures. As of late, there's been more, she uses her aunt and other family members as reference for her paintings. Large scale, heavily detailed, great grasp of light, wonderful pieces of artwork. So absolutely recommend checking out her work, Aaliyah Chapin. Audrey Flack, as I mentioned, is one of the founding people pushing the movement for hyperrealism. Her works are often basically still lifes that she set out as if it's, if you can imagine a woman's night table, maybe a makeup mirror and all the things she might have on that particular desktop. So there are personal photos. This She often has cards come up. Flowers are frequent. Sometimes fruit, little knickknacks. There's one here that's all paint, but just an incredible level of detail in her work, and definitely one of the founding people in hyperrealism. Bernie Wrightson is originally an illustrator, later comic book artist, who happened to be one of the people that I'd loved as a kid doing Swamp Thing. He illustrated Frankenstein. He did, this is from Cycle of the Werewolf, a Stephen King graphic novel. He has images here from Texas Chainsaw Massacre and, lots of different, I just want to get this thing in the right space here so we can see. There we go. Lots of different pieces that he's created over the years, but incredibly detailed artist. Did paintings as well, most famous though for his pen and ink work. And it's that horror sci-fi thing that I love and I have a pull towards and I don't go to enough, but it reminds me to kind of keep those pathways open because it's a part of my brain that gets me excited creatively. Then I'm going to come back to Chris Guest because I really feel Chris builds on top of John Singer Sargent. So I'm going to go to Chris after. And he's really probably one of my favorite current modern painters. So I'll come back to Chris as one of the later ones. Clark Hewlings, amazing painter for realism, a wonderful understanding of light. Just like, look at that. My God. Just light and shadow interplay, incredible understanding of values. See, looking at Clark's work makes me think of James Gurney, who's a current painter that I adore his work as well. But again, I would see such strong similarities that I would go to Clark Hewlings. Primarily, James is a newer painter, again, brilliant, but I don't see enough differentiation, for myself that makes James an art parent over Clark. Iman Maleki, an Iranian painter, incredible realism, again, incredible grasp of light, just a wonderful painter all around. Looking at Jai Lu, who spent time, and it's again, I find patterns in the art and artists whose work I love that, makes sense that I see it popping up in my own personal work. It's human form. It's grasping of light and shadow. It's dramatic images that are not necessarily posed. Those are the things that capture my imagination, and that's the kind of art that speaks to me. John Singer Sargent, who we've already talked about, and some of these you really need to see images of them close up, because even at this screen where I've got it blown up a little bit bigger, you can't tell as much, but one of these sections, like this line, is literally just a line of paint, and another, on top of a line of paint, on top of solid color. Like, he has such control of value that he gets the color right, that he doesn't have to go into hyper detail, because he got the value right. When you're standing 20, 30 feet away, it looks damn near like you're looking at a photograph. But as soon as you get in close, you see it's just these big brush strokes, which I adore. I love that so much. And it's helped me go from thinking hyperrealism is all I ever wanted to really realizing where painting can take me in a much more painterly approach that speaks to me. That's doesn't make one right or one wrong. This is just what I get excited about. I love the stories of John Singer Sargent going to, mixing paint and then running up and putting it next to the model to see if the color was right, and then running back and mixing it, going up, and that he would spend 15, 20 minutes to make one stroke because he wanted to get the value exactly right before he even put it on the canvas. And that kind of mentality about getting value right is really exciting for me. And that's one of the reasons why John Singer Sargent is one of my art parents. Julie Bell. You may know Julie Bell's husband, Boris Vallejo, very big fantasy artist in the 80s. He used to do a ton of the old 70s and 80s. He did a ton of the WrestleMania posters back in the day, a lot of fantasy and Conan the Barbarian covers. But Julie's really and Julie did a lot of fantasy art as well. Most of her work is animals and women in a lot of her pieces, but they're just brilliant levels of detail. I love her kind of ethereal fantasy that she puts in with her realism. Again, incredible understanding of light and shadow interplayed in all her work. Very dramatic, kind of always movement, action kind of pieces going on. Not necessarily posed work. I love. Julie Bell is definitely somebody I highly recommend, and an active artist today. Julian Dupree, I love. Again, speaking of painters who have work that looks incredibly detailed, and then when you get in close, you see that it's minimal brush strokes. But again, in a very different kind of style. There's something about growing up on a farm that I think keeps coming back in some of these pieces of work for me. And Julian Dupree kind of takes me back to my roots a lot. And I just genuinely love his work. It's crazy. Really good stuff. I highly recommend checking out Julian Dupree. Ken Danby, again, well known for his Painter of the Goalie, very popular, but his goalie painting didn't speak to me. These paintings he did with water and capturing light and shadow, uh, just blown away. I was just blown away. And that's one of the reasons why Ken Danby is absolutely one of my art parents. And it makes me want to dig in more to his work, find out, how he made things, what his techniques were. And it helps me grow personally as an artist. Luis Ricardo Falero, who I spoke about in the main pod, just look at it. Like, dear, it's crazy. And, Witches on the Sabbath, Witches Going to Their Sabbath from 1879 is really a defining piece for me because it's got, if there was a painting that had almost everything I wanted in it. So I've got some bodiness, I've got some science fiction, I've got women, I've got light, I've got shadow, I've got everything mixed together. This is that painting. And that's one of the reasons why. But you can see the Frazetta-esque stuff in his work, right? And that's why I have Falero as an art parent, but not Frank Frazetta, even though I adore Frank Frazetta's work. Mary Pratt. God, I love Mary Pratt. I can't believe I spent most of my life not knowing Mary Pratt's work. Her level of realism is just insane. This cranberry jelly painting with the tin foil and all the light reflecting on it and the collecting of light. Dear Lord. It looks, I just shake my head. I'm like, it's incredible. She's put so much heart into her work. Reading about how she how she approached everything, how she saw so much light that it was so exciting to her all the time when she looked at her work. And it's very emotional for me talking about Mary Pratt, seeing her work, knowing she's a fellow Canadian artist, that she spent so much of her time in the city I live in now. It's just a weird serendipitous connection that she's definitely at the top of my work. In fact, in my title card where I show two artists, one of them is Mary Pratt. I adore her work. And the other one that I absolutely adore, probably near the top, it's Norman Rockwell. Again, very different. And Norman Rockwell was not considered an amazing artist in his time. He was considered, kind of a campy illustrator, as he did the Saturday Evening Post and created some of these famous pieces. Uh, I love his work. It's very stylized, very much his own, still in the realm of realism. And again, techniques that aren't necessarily used by other artists, but I love that his every one of his paintings are a moment in time. When I tried to do when I did one of my recent paintings, Last Walk to the Wheat Field, which was based on the story of Van Gogh and his final kind of moments, that was a moment in time that I saw in my head that I had to create and put on canvas. I also did a piece kind of as an homage to this tattooed piece by Norman Rockwell, where I used a modern tattoo artist and basically restaged it to create a new piece because I love Norman Rockwell. I think there's a lot that modern artists can learn if you're interested in realism at all, looking at Norman's work. Olivia de Barandinas, she's just incredible. Very much still active. She's been doing like pinup stuff, back to like Playboy magazines years ago, with lots of Betty Page stuff. Um, to very detailed realism. This painting she did of Ripley from Alien is just crazy. This one of Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia. She's just a brilliant artist. It mixed media work, a lot of it's watercolor with acrylics mixed in and some airbrushing to kind of make the piece she wants to do. And again, very much using heavy image transfer in her images. And to me, it doesn't matter whether you use it or don't use it. Great art's the end result, period. And I love Olivia's work, and that's definitely a side of me that comes out in some of my artwork. What can I say? Like, look at that. Rembrandt is just stunning to me, and he wasn't necessarily obsessed with capturing the beautiful, which I find existed a lot in earlier artists' work. This piece of this soldier, just the man in armor. I actually saw this painting in person in Scotland at the Glasgow Museum. I stood in front of it for about a half hour, trying not to bawl, because what you can't see looking at a photo of a painting, but you can see whenever we get the chance to travel again and visit some of these amazing works of art, are the strokes of the brush made by the painter. And this looks, at a glance at a photo, slow, detailed, methodical work. And then when you see it in person, you can see that his brush strokes are practically flying. That he was painting so quickly, like he had to get it on canvas. There's nothing slow about the process of his painting at all. And adapting that into my own work has always been something that, it's exciting for me. So then I look at, let's see here, we'll go back, see if there's anybody besides Rembrandt left. Yes, there are a few. Robert Bateman, who I've already talked about. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with Robert's work. Been a conservationalist almost his entire life. Has been supportive of animal welfare for the majority of his life, and just incredible paintings. Understanding of light and how it hits different textures of fur, understanding volumetrics of fog and mist. Just brilliant, brilliant work. There's no way around that. Rosa Bonheur, who I mentioned before. This actually isn't a painting of roses. This is just a portrait that was done of her by Anna Klump. But you've probably seen Rosa Bonheur's paintings and not realized that this Highland Shepherd is a pretty famous painting. I just love, again, loose brush strokes, great understanding of light, great understanding of color value. Look at that. That's from 1844. No photographs, guys. You're painting from life. You're sketching and drawing from life. It's incredible. And that's not a posed image, right? Just wonderful, wonderful work. Lastly, and he's one of the big ones for me, William Adolphe Bouguereau. Just like how these are hundreds of years old, and the color and the light, just wow. And that's what I think your art parent should do for you. These images excite me. You need to find the images that excite you, right? And get to look at their work. And now that I've shown you some of the pieces that have spoke to me, let me just give you a little brief preview. Now, again, this was early on in my painting. These are some paintings I did before I explored who my art parents were. They're, assorted things. There's a blood moon. There's a beach. I've got some light shining through. There's an image I did of John Lennon. This is Margarita Pring, in a sunrise. It's a Darth Vader I did pretty early on when I was starting out. Now, these two I want to talk about, well, all of these, but what I will say, all of these photos have in common. This prince, this Arya from Game of Thrones, this image at a sunset and water, which again, you're seeing the things that draw my attention. Again, this is Stefania, who's a model from Australia. And this early Gord Downie I did. Again, you're seeing light and shadow coming in my work, but what you are also seeing is in almost every case, I'm directly recreating a photo. I've seen a photo I liked. I'm basically trying to copy the photo and recreate it. That's really where I started. And again, very early in my painting. That's the kind of images that captured my mind and things I wanted to paint. Now let's jump to some of the things I've created since I've discovered my art parents. So here we have, again, this was a photo, but I'm using bigger brush strokes. This is my bathhouse in Bhutan. It's one of my more favorite pieces that I've created recently. The composition, everything really kind of just spoke to me from the beginning when I saw the image, but in painting it, there were choices that I made that were beyond the original image. This same thing with this was painted live. So this is based on a photo by Paul Nicklin, who is a National Geographic photographer, brilliant photographer. I actually asked Paul, and same with this one. So this photo was by Matthew Paley, also a National Geographic photographer. The photo reference for this was, as I said, Paul Nicklin. In both cases, I reached out to these photographers and obtained permission to use their photos as reference to do these paintings. This was very detailed, more time consuming. This was a single evening and came out fast. It was really about values and motion, and I mean, you will probably find these people are all in the exact same position in the original photo, but if you looked at this one next to the photo, it's very much my eye looking, the reference of colors and lights, but the shapes are not exactly the same. It's all about the motion and the feel of what I'm trying to get on canvas, and mostly bigger brush strokes to create this water. This is a commission that I did, and again, it's a captured moment. And while it looks crazy detailed, it's another one where if you get in close, you can see the brush strokes. This one that I did of another fellow local artist, Aaron Wood, I'm pretty proud of this one as well. This is another one that, at a distance, looks fairly detailed, and as you get close, you start to see all the brush strokes, and that's what's fun. Facing Your Light, this is one of my favorite pieces. This was a 6-hour painting that came out incredibly fast. You can actually watch on my YouTube channel, watch me paint it from a blank canvas to finish. But it very much spoke to me on, thinking about the things I learned from my art parents, and how I wanted to create this going forward. This was a great one. You can see my Robert Bateman influence and some of the light and stuff I like to play in this. My Gord Downie was a big one for me. And it was one of the first times that this was created because of this one. Somebody wanted to buy this one, which is not for sale, so I created this as a custom. But they're very much while realistic, you've got big brushstrokes and runny marks and things that are more signature to me as opposed to just see a picture, paint a picture. And this is, one that I'm really pleased with. Live in Shadows, a painting I did of Liv Sage, one of her photographs, again, very strongly playing in and out of light. This was my homage to Mary Pratt. It's called Nothing's Wrong, and it plays off the tinfoil that we talked about before, and setting up a feeling and thinking about a thought and playing with light. There's a lot combined into this piece that I don't think I would have wanted to create or thought about without looking at Mary Pratt and her work. This is an earlier one that I did, last days of summer. I feel a lot of Robert Bateman influence in this. I don't think that it's up to his level of detail, but it was also a single evening alive painting that I did that I was really pleased with, just how I started to get a good grasp on fur and light. This feels very Norman Rockwell to me. It's a painting I did of my grandparents for my uncle. This is another one I did of my grandparents for my mother, and you can kind of see the development of my style that's very much a moment with Norman Rockwell to something that is a little more personally mine, with some of the loose, some tight detail, but also loose brushstrokes. And I think it really kind of shows where I'm developing and where I'm going with my work. This one, Shake It Up, is a good example of kind of the things that I do now, where I may have a reference, but I'm taking it to a different level. I'm adding tons of texture. I'm literally splattering paint on the canvas to kind of get the effect that I want. And I think a lot of that comes from digging into who my art parents are. So I hope that was of value to you. I hope you take the time for yourself to find who your art parents are. I think it's a great exercise. I was really pleased when I had a chance to see it on the Draftsman. Again, I recommend going back and checking that out, seeing what Stan and Marshall have to say on the subject. I hope that you found what I had to say about it value. And until next time, just keep creating.